All right. Hello, everyone. This is Trip, and my buddy Matt Segall is here. What's up, Matt?
Hey, Trip. Glad to join you today.
Oh yeah. I'm excited. This is going to be fun. For those of you that were a part of the last reading group I did with our mutual friend Andrew Davis, looking at Whitehead's Religion in the Making, everyone liked it. They said, let's do this again. And the perk of those reading groups is it's for Substack members, and which really kind of sets up something exciting where you don't have to, be in a one-way conversation because there's a couple thousand people in the homebrew class. This is just the Substack members, and we do it on Zoom, and it's fun. So out of that, I was like, who's another one of my process friends I could hang out with and do this? Does any of them have Substack so we can bring friends from their Substack in? And then I thought of my buddy Matt Segall, and he said yes, and we're going to get to read.
Have I ever said no to you, Trip? I don't think so.
Well, not in anything we can discuss live on the internet,
Yeah. Well, you're probably talking about beer camp. I'll just assume you're talking about Theology Beer Camp, which I haven't been able to accept an invitation to yet, but I hope to.
This year in Kansas City, I'm just saying, Andrew's going to be there. Ilya's going to be there. Well, I haven't really announced who's going to be there yet, but those are some of your friends that possibly could be there. When
I think you just did.
Yeah. Oh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to be hanging out with a German sociologist, Hartmut Rosa, and we were going back and forth about what to read, and he has a brand new book that just came out. Show it to everybody, Matt. Look at that. Look at that.
Time and World. I don't know if it's reversed mirrored on everyone else's screen. There we go. Nice work.
And it's really cool because one, excellent introduction, and then that moves through like the development of his thought, and then it has the kind of like essays or chapters or lecture type things where he's giving like the condensed presentation of important parts of his larger kind of picture as a sociologist. And we'll be able to go through it, talk about them, and keep putting them in conversation with process philosophy, which when I read them, it's just immediately obvious, But do you have that problem just as someone that loves process philosophy? If you're reading another book and you like it a lot, you're like, this is basically halfway to Whitehead.
everything good is at least halfway to Whitehead.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, Matt, why don't you introduce, say just a bit about your own Substack, Footnotes to Plato. So anyone that wants to get the invites to join all the Zooms and such, you can be a member of either one of our Substacks or both. That is an elect.
Preferably both.
People. Come on.
Yeah. I think our Substacks, our work resonates quite deeply, to borrow a term from Rosa that we'll get into. But yeah, I've been blogging for 20 years, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And my Substack is a combination of reflections on everything from my own personal spiritual life and views to religious studies, the scholarly academic study of religion and spirituality, to, on the other side of the spectrum, metaphysics and science and physics, biology. I try to remain transdisciplinary and never stay in one place for too long. So there's something for everybody on my Substack, I hope.
Yeah. And you've been on the podcast a number of times. People can go check those out. You're both a professor. You work with the Process Center for the kind of process and science engagement. You and Andrew and Peter are working on a really cool project around philosophy of mind that will be putting on some cool events and such. So there are a lot of shared interest here. So what I did was I pulled out my notes. I have little Google Doc files of when I finish reading books, and I put an organized version of my notes in my Google Doc. And so then I went into it and just cut and pasted all the sections that I wanted to talk about with a process person. Like, here's little teasers of sorts that will come up when we're reading the book, and then that's what I use to make slides. So we're just using them to prompt our conversation, but we'll end up getting in details to all of this as we go through, and we'll probably discover other things that Matt was like, no, if I already had my notes, I would have added a whole section on this trip. And then I'll say, good, thank you. I'll add it to my notes. And a year from now, I'll forget he told me about it and pretend like I thought of it. That's what's happening.
What are friends for?
Yeah, what are friends for? But retweeting without letting anyone know. But yeah, so one of the bits that I really love about Rosa's work is he does what Whitehead did, and that a lot of process philosophers do, that a lot of our peers don't do. And he does like old school sociology, like I'm giving a big account of the world. Like this is a sociological big theory. And the same way where, if I'm sure Matt has this feeling like you're reading something and you're like, oh, look at this new paper on, testing a theory of consciousness. And now you're like, okay, well, that would problematize this theory, but what about this? And how could you weave it in this? And the next thing you know, you read one little thing that you now process back into your big picture that is like permanently in flux. And yet you want to get a better and better and thicker account that has more and more traction from the lived experience of yourself and other living things around you as best we can have access to them. There's like a big picture going on. American sociology tends not to do that. It tends to want to have like a really specific question, narrowed as much as possible you can investigate, and then we'll talk about this one thing. And there's a tradition in German sociology where it's much closer to philosophy. It's like, that's boring. How about I tell you about the engine of modernity? But yeah. So Rosa is a big picture thinker, and so here, Matt, I think how about I'll just say something in less than a minute when I flip the slide, and then you direct whatever you want to talk about.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. This could be good. And also the call of the world bit. Come on. I was just having fun with titles of connecting things he talks about. Anyway, so when Rosa talks about modernity, he wants to understand modernity sociologically. And I think a lot of our philosophical peers talk about modernity and then postmodernity primarily about epistemology. And he wants to talk about it sociologically. And one of the images that he uses is frenetic standstill. It's this exhaustion of the modern soul is like the predicament of modernity. And so he wants to look at like, what is this shared feeling, a kind of deep bone weary exhaustion, or the spiritual condition he calls frenetic standstill. And in it, he wants to see that modernity has a form of dynamic stabilization. Modernity stays stable by being dynamic, demanding growth, accumulation, acquisition. And so and here's just a few examples of the felt part of what it looks like, right? We're promised an abundance of time. Look at new technology. We're becoming more efficient. And yet we feel like we have a time famine, like we don't have time enough for what ultimately matters. We're told in modernity, look at all these ways we can be hyper connected. You have friends. Look at the digital connections of community. Look at all this. And yet we're lonelier than ever. And then we get burnout. This is an epidemic of all sorts. You're burnt out, and he wants to go, but what if it's not personal failure? But it's because the very ground beneath our feet, the very structure of modernity requires this kind of frenetic energy. Just to stay in place, you have to get faster.
Yep. And part of that dynamic is the competitiveness of modern life. We all feel pitted against one another to be better. And, we both want to achieve, in Rosa's sense, a kind of autonomy. We want to be free from the imposition of state, the imposition of limits of any kind, nature, but we also we want to be authentic. We want to realize ourselves, but Rosa turning to a kind of sociological analysis that's big picture, like you're saying, allows us to see that there are social conditions of self-realization, and in modernity, which Rosa, as a good romantic, thinks it's basically been a failure, an anthropological catastrophe. He says modernity is systematically undermining those social conditions that would make authenticity and self-realization possible, even autonomy and freedom, which is supposed to be the main value of modernity, because it's been so it's accelerated so much, these social forces. Even being autonomous is impossible in the modern social condition. So here we are. Even the very existence of this book as a collection of essays meant for the enlightened public, maybe academic, but also outside of academia, to have time to read it in a digestible way, to get familiar with Rosa's work. Instead of reading a 900-page tome, you can pick up this book and in your busy life, trying to compete with everybody, you get a little taste of what it might be like to resonate again with the world. So
yeah, or they could get the book, come hang out with us on Zoom, underline the parts everyone that read the book mentioned, then remember their favorite parts of the conversation. So when others look at the book, they can talk about it, but they didn't even have to spend time reading it, Matt. We can help them.
We are packaging this, commodifying resonance for them to be able to have more interesting conversations with their friends.
So here's a bit about this that he uses this image of a bike, or like kind of the treadmill of dynamic stabilization, right? He says that our society is a bicycle. It only stays upright if it's moving. If it stops, it falls, right? So this is why so many people that experience burnout feel like, oh, I have failed, right? This is a predicament of enlightenment freedom, is you give someone freedom, but then anything that's in their life that is problematic, you are now responsible for fixing it. So how do we fix it? Oh, your health. We'll track your calories, track your steps, do this. Oh, well, you want to advance in your career? Well, here's how to win friends and influence people. Oh, here's how to leverage AI to do X, Y, and Z. Here's how you this kind of thing. And he wants to go, this isn't a personal failure, it's a structural trap. Modernity isn't understood by its values, which we normally lift up like liberty, reason, freedom, but by that mechanism of dynamic stabilization. And for him, our economy, our institutions, and even our sense of self, right, require growth, acceleration, innovation, just to maintain the status quo. Like, we don't grow to reach a destination, we grow to avoid collapse. And that time period of switch, this is something he talks about, Andreas Reckwigs talks about, is like the shift of the economic order as we move towards neoliberalism. Right, like the post-war consensus had a different engine. This moves towards both hyper individualism, right? Like each person is the creative entrepreneur of themselves and are unique and have to use their freedom to be particular, and these kinds of things. This drive plays out in lots of places. Now, when I was thinking about this, here's the image I used as Tripp's process interpretation of it. Because you ride a bike on your own, and I wanted to introduce a more social dynamic element of it from the very beginning, rather than imagining everyone riding bikes. Matt, you grew up in California, right?
No, Florida.
Florida.
Actually, South
Okay.
Florida.
So there's plenty of pools there. So did you have the above ground pool experience?
I have. Yeah.
Okay. Here's the thing about above ground pools. They're circles, and they're all like 3.5 feet deep. And it only takes, whether 2 or 3 kids are gathered, they will create a whirlpool and run in circles. And so that's the image of this that I find helpful. So if people are already running in circles, and parents, this is just, you're considering whether or not you're going to jail if the youngest and shortest one drowns, but they're all going in a circle. So the inertia of the water is there. And if you get in, the only way you don't have friction is to join the circle. And then the only way to not have friction and get pushed is to be increasing the speed. And so it gets out of hand, and someone slips and they get pulled under. And then this goes on. And and to me, that is like a beautiful relational example of this dynamic stabilization. It only works by going with the flow and going around it. And let's imagine that flow is what's burning us out as individuals. If you try to stop, you get sucked under. If you're a parent, you look at your kids and you're like, look, I know this is leading me to burnout, but also I can't change the neoliberal order. So, and I'm experiencing this with my 18-year-old applying to college. I need you to learn how to win at a system I find utterly problematic for my own well-being, my neighbor's well-being, my non-Huber's neighbor's well-being, and my imaginary great-grandkids. It's horrible for all of it. I don't like it. We have decrepit institutions and are killing a planet and ourselves. But since I can't change this, I'm going to teach you how to survive in this whirlpool. That is like when you get that, then you don't think, oh, you know what the problem is? You didn't teach your kid how to play the game enough, or you didn't win at the game enough. What if you're like the parent sitting outside of the above ground pool looking at this going, man, somebody's going to drown. Do I need to tell them this is bad because their brother's not tall enough? Or do I need to get them floaties? Or
I like this metaphor a lot, and I want to expand it a little bit because, this whole industrial growth society that's been accelerating for centuries, it imagines that the human economy can exist as a kind of perpetual motion machine,
right,
in isolation from the rest of the community of life on this planet. Perpetual motion is not possible. The economy is feeding on energy flows coming in from the rest of the earth, and it's producing a lot of waste that's mucking up the life systems of the planet. And eventually the pool wall is going to burst. And a lot of us most of us are caught in the rat race.
Yeah.
And we engage in philosophy. We read sociology because we want to kind of gain that perspective of the parents looking into the pool and see that, oh, that wall is looking pretty flimsy. This can't go on much longer. But how do we escape from it? I mean, some people decide they don't want to have kids. Because why would I want to throw another being into this whirlpool? And that's a withdrawal from human life in a way. It's an example of one of the forms of alienation that Rosa would be talking about. That so many people who do have the perspective from outside the pool and aren't just like so caught up in the whirlpool that they don't even have that outside perspective. They decide they're not going to participate in the continuity of life anymore. And so that's an example of how knowledge of this situation, which you'd think be required to diagnose and resolve it, is itself a source of alienation that pulls us away from, actually figuring out how to move with each other differently. Because we can change the whirlpool. We made it and we can change it. But we feel so alienated from that process of social co-creation that I feel like we're kind of frozen in place while we must also continually accelerate, as Rosa's pointing out.
Yeah. And one of the things that that he points out that is that this condition helps us learn to relate to the world with aggression. And it's that, if you think of it as a kind of like an existential mood, the moment what selects for survival in a sick system is aggression, and you actually just learn to be more aggressive to protect yourself out of fear of being left out behind and dying and this kind of thing. And so that aggression is essential. And here, as someone already anticipated we're going here in the chat, the whirlpool image also captures why slow down is not good enough response. Slowing down means you just get taken off by the current, right? We're in a predicament that is inherently intersubjective. And if one person opts out, it eats you, right? Think of the people whose finitude gets parasitically or vampirically sucked by this system. And if they opt out or it diminishes their ability to keep up, they just get pulled under. They become the non-person or the person on the margins who isn't even recognized their dignity and humanity by people that are just trying to stay afloat in the system. and it's that element of aggression that plays out in all sorts of ways. Let's see if I put it. This is the way he describes the promise. But the aggression, I think, leads for us as individuals to that dynamic of burnout. It was not a conversation among humans in the West until the neoliberal context. Then it became an epidemic. Then it gets something you can diagnose. Then it's, all these other kinds of things. But it has corollaries once we recognize that dynamic stabilization is embedded in an ecosystem. It leads up to, like what you were talking about, of burning up the world. So it's like we have burnout, we have burn up of the of nature writ large, and then when you're sitting in this space in our institutions that are supposed to hold space for community, democratic deliberation, or all those could preserve rights, redistribute wealth, give equity, and anyway, you think of all those kinds of things, they fail to the point that now the number of people say burn it down, right? And so it's those like three elements of burn that when I was reading this, it made me think back to when what's the common good, the economics book Cobb did.
For the common good, right?
Yeah. I think that was the shorter one. Then there's like the bigger one. Anyway, when he did in his whole point was pointing out the role of growth dynamic in the economy is just not even put variables in about our planet, right? And since then, in the late 80s, like as this identity came online, it's now led to results where human being subjectivity is continuously deprived, and there's an inherent suspicion and distrust and cynicism towards any collective action or institution, right? And so it's like this fire of dynamic stabilization's burning out and burning up and burning down, and then we're sitting there going, WTF?
I mean, this metaphor keeps building in my imagination as I hear you describe the situation, because it's, we live in a very stratified society with working class people and very, very rich people who don't need to work to survive. They don't need to sell their labor time. They just survive on collecting rent, basically, and interest. And so you've got people who are actually driving this whirlpool with the energy of their own limbs and bodies, pushing like barely above the surface, able to get some oxygen while really driving the whirlpool, while you have a bunch of other people, or relatively fewer people actually, in inner tubes just floating on the surface, harvesting all of that labor energy from the masses of people who are driving it. And then
this just sounds like a lazy river, but it's like the a Hunger Games lazy river. The 99% are in a whirlpool, and the 1% are sitting on inner tubes being like, I don't know why this is called lazy river. Why do y'all keep dying and drowning? This is great. Like, this is vacation. If only we could have a bar that hands out margaritas without getting off.
Yeah. But also the water's spilling over the edge because the whirlpool's getting faster and faster, and it's everyone's pretty aware now that this can't continue in the way that it has, and yet nobody knows how to stop it.
Well, luckily Delta plants a lot of trees. Anyway, we get this part because I was excited about my image and wanting to try it on you. But when he talks about you like, this is the consequences that we've been talking about of modernity, but he goes, now here's its gospel, or here's its promise, and he calls it the AAA horizon. That modernity has a promise of happiness through mastery or control, right? Which every process person's like, that might not go well. But it happens where you say, here's the good life. We're going to make things available. We're going to make it accessible. We're going to make it attainable. So, like, available strawberries in winter is one of his favorite examples, which if you are in Europe, that means you get these delicious ones from southern Spain, shipped all the way up to Scotland or the Black Forest in Germany. And there's nothing in your ecosystem that says it should be this delicious, but we've made it available. Maybe it's no longer available if tariffs are imposed, but that's and then that makes everyone mad. Or accessible, right? Like think of streaming music where at some point you have to decide how many times am I moving all my CDs because they're all on Spotify, and 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 I just feel good to have it accessible. Or I'm going to go download all these podcasts, but I'm not going to listen to them. I just want the ability to make them accessible when they're there. Or it plays out in all sorts of parts of our life. And then the attainable is that kind of control that shows up, say, like over one's health or finance and these kinds of things. But the aggression he's getting at is like, you're told this is what the good life, someone that could have all of this, right? Or I'm going to move to the city because this city, there's like all these cultural creatives and I have art and these restaurants and blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, well, how many times did you see art or have like fine dining and long conversations this month? Well, once. And you're like, well, that's the same as if you'd lived in the rural area you grew up, but you wanted it available. Like these goods become something to give your finitude towards. And so for him, this what he calls a AAA horizon is set there around control. That modernity wants to control the world. And before we can get into this part, one of the questions I had for you, because it's one of those like Tripp wishes this is exactly what he meant, but when we're reading it, you can decide. But I see this drive towards control coming out of like an increasingly modern world. Like it takes off that same time we make what Whitehead calls like the bifurcation of nature in modernity. Like when we look at the world, and the parts we tend to are the parts of the world that can generate for us the power to control it. And so think of the success of science makes us get infatuated with a kind of quantitative account of the world. We get smitten by theories of control and determinism. We want to we give unto patterns or habits the authority of law, right? Natural law, economic law. We do all these things to a bifurcated world. Or think of like Ian McGilchrist's work about the different hemispheres of reflection and these kinds of things. And we end up flattening to the world to that which we can know under the terms of control. And then are asking ourselves, well, what does the good life look like if this is the world? Or what's the Arthur Eddington's line like about we've abridged the book of nature, right? So like if we've already abridged it, now what do we do? It's like, it's not even the extended edition of Lord of the Rings. It's like the short version that you're like, no, you should read the book. But if you're going to watch it, you need to watch the extended editions and remind yourself there's no Faramir gets treated nasty and Tom Bombadil's not in here. And then, no, I'm going to do just the normal version of the, like you've just abridged the whole thing where you're looking at it going, is this all there is? And when you think of all kind of the three layers that he keeps pulling through his sociological analysis, sometimes he gives 5, but of like the existential and the kind of ecological and then the material, economic, institutional, all three of them have ways that epistemology, that process thought problematizes, kind of generates an orientation of aggression and control, and then a blindness to the very parts of reality that we've muted because we can't control them.
Yeah. No, we've instrumentalized nature, including human nature. But this bifurcation, the connection to Whitehead's account of the fallacy of bifurcation is exactly the split that, Rosa and Charles Taylor and others in this romantic stream, I would say, of social and philosophical thought are critical of. The way that instrumental reason and say instrumental rationality and value rationality, say, have been severed. It's the same sort of critique that Whitehead's pointing out when he talks about the bifurcated view of nature, where everything qualitative and subjective is removed from the natural world studied by science, which is imagined or conjectured to be a kind of mathematical model that's deterministic and easily calculated, and we gain a lot of predictive control over some aspect of nature by treating it that way. But by isolating everything subjective, everything aesthetic and moral, isolating that from nature, we end up desensitizing ourselves to the full reality of the natural world as a living, organic, evolving process that we ourselves are bound up with. And so, yeah, we're only in modernity. All of our institutions have become increasingly desensitized to the qualitative dimension of nature and have gone about trying to quantify, model, predict, and control the part of nature that we do attend to. But because that's only part of the picture, we've been systematically destroying this living planet, right? Because we've blinded ourselves to its qualitative, aesthetic, and moral depths. And that's a scary proposition, though, to re-engage with the reality of value in the non-human world, to be as subjects to values that are not freely produced by ourselves.
Yeah.
That's a scary proposition. And, in many ways, modern emancipatory movements were rightly resisting that kind of imposition, not just imposition of cosmic values, but imposition of institutional values that had become too hierarchical and not democratically, able to be held to account by the people that had those values imposed on them. So there's something to be preserved, but we need to overcome this. Bruno Latour has this way of talking about the way that modern societies, in realizing freedom for human beings, had to, as a corollary to that, imagine nature as something that could be controlled and dominated so as to afford the type of freedom that modern individuals wanted. That modern individual freedom and the domination of nature really go hand in hand. And so a new kind of guy in politics, like what he was looking for, would require transfiguring that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's definitely big connections between the two. I saw a long conversation between Rosa and Latour that took place during like COVID lockdown. So not too long before Latour passed. And that was actually one of the big themes that I remember coming up from it. So the cost of this kind of control thing for him leads to what he calls the paradox of control, where you have a mute world and then monsters, the birth of monsters. And when he starts talking about what the cost of control is, he says something like, when everything's available, well, the world becomes mute, cold, gray. The background music becomes the background noise of life. Seasons lose their meaning because now we've controlled our environment. When night and day happen, what the temperature is, all these kinds of things. Like he's like, this is a growing feature of modernity, and that's where he wants to say that this becomes the root of alienation. Not alienation just for the individual, but alienation through all the kind of sociological levels. And when we have conquered the world, we end up no longer feeling at home in it. And in his book on uncontrollability, that's where he spends the most time talking about the monster bit here. He talks about this generates a birth of monsters. So our quest for control, then the uncontrollability becomes monstrous to him. And those become threats because now our security is based on control. Because we're not at home. We are in the whirlpool, right? Or on the bike and can't slow down. And so, and he gives a number of examples, like, the global financial collapse is built for wealth, but now what does it do? It behaves like an unpredictable force of nature. And then the evangelist for capitalism has to explain how it hits the fan every so often with an increasing gap between the rich and the poor and the excluded. So, or, you split the atom, it's meant to give us power, and then we can take out whole cities. And you can think of other ways in which this happens, but that decision to go and dominate and control, we end up creating systems that dominate us. And, knowing all the conversations, even around artificial intelligence and giving permission to be tracked and surveilled, or or not reading the terms and conditions, then the actual space in which the neoliberal order can know, chronicle, and turn our lives into data increases. Now we spend more time often awake doing things that do generate data for advertisers or platforms to control us, right? And so this paradox of control, he wants to name and go like, look, there's significant consequences to it. And then you have a system that the uncontrollability of reality is a threat, rather than, if we just think of all the wisdom traditions, that is a given and an assumption about the nature flow of life. Whether you're parables of Jesus, Buddha, the Tao, that no one thinks you're going to just go control everything. It's about just differentiating that to which we're related to and responsible in those relations, and that which we're responsible for, what we do with our own finitude, our own actions and words and such. And the wisdom invites us to tending to our own agency in responsible relations rather than controlling power over others. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, this paradox of so-called technological progress is that we end up being caged by our own convenience. And people are just willing to give away all privacy and have every millisecond of their lives transformed into data, fed into corporation's giant server farm that's training its proprietary AI. And, you know, we think we benefit from having whatever this artificially intelligent model is telling us, predicting what we might want next before we even know we want it, as if somehow that's affording us greater autonomy and authenticity, when in fact we've allowed our machines to mechanize us. We're not using them as tools. We are becoming their tools. And, you know, whether it was a communist state or the capitalist market and the corporation, modernity in both of those forms has increasingly dehumanized us. You know, and there was a third alternative in the 20th century called fascism, alternative to communism and capitalism, and that didn't work out too well either. And so, you know, here we are searching for a way forward where it's not clear how to deal with these monsters, and everybody thinks they know what the most dangerous monster is. Everybody's pointing the finger, right and left, pointing the finger at each other, which, you know, just it seems as though, I'll just drop this in at this point because it's relevant to the monsters issue. It seems like the political right tends to want to personalize what are actually social failures, whereas the political left wants to politicize what might actually be personal failures. And so, and this is just an extreme caricature of either side, but I think that there's something in that dynamic, and that moving forward beyond the ways that modernity has tried to deal with the monsters that it has created, it's going to require not simply politicizing the personal or personalizing the political, but finding a new way to be in resonance as individuals in a collective cultural project.
Yeah, that's hopeful. All right, I'm just going to go to the next one, or we'll take forever to get through this.
Yeah, sure.
But, you know, these are just teasers because we're going to be reading the book with anyone that wants to join.
That's right.
So if early in his career he starts kind of developing what is the task of a sociologist trying to talk about the modern world, to then thinking about what is the mechanism of stabilization, and then he's developed here. Then the next big period is his work on resonance, and there's a giant book called Resonance, and then there's the Uncontrollability book, which is like the synthesis of it. And then cool thing about the Uncontrollability book, it also has cool shout outs to Schleiermacher and Bultmann in it. So just saying, you know, but resonance for him is it's like he thinks a sociologist isn't just trying to be descriptive. They're also tasked with the question of the good life. And so, and oftentimes in a modern context, we've neglected big accounts and then answers. And so he said, if the problem of it is acceleration and the alienation that it generates, the solution is not just slowing down. The true opposite of alienation isn't a speed change, it's resonance. And resonance, for him, is definitely not a vague concept or feeling. It's a specific mode of relationship with the world, a responsive, transformative connection. And I think the next bit is where I show like the elements of resonance, where it's just like catnip if you're reading this and like this first book, and then you're a process person. So the anatomy of a resonant connection, he talks about the kind of 4 elements. One is the affective element of being called, like we're touched or moved by something outside of ourself. It begins with listening. Like to be resonant is to be addressed. Then there's the responsive element, self-efficacy. Like we're not passive in this. We reach out and respond, like creating a vibration between subject and world. Like it is a genuine openness to the other, which is a risk, like the risk of Abraham tending to the 3 strangers approaching him in the desert, right? He didn't come out with a sword. He offered them a meal, and turns out he's entertaining angels, right? And finds out, oh, Sarah's pregnant. Which is a passage that so many philosophers of late have spent time looking at. Think of the whole kind of like religious turn in post-structuralist philosophy. The risk of hospitality to otherness is something that shows up across a number of thinkers, and here you see it. And then that third moment is transformation, that we're genuinely changed by the encounter. We're not the same. And this opens up a kind of like spaciousness, and it's not determined going in. And this is what he think a place where he keeps pointing out a problem of modernity. If we think controlling is winning, and succeeding, yep. What kind of encounter do you have with otherness if sameness is the only possible outcome? Or what kind of encounter do you have with difference if control is the solution? And so, and then the last part is like recognition that it is uncontrollable. It can't be manufactured or forced. You can show up in spaces or orient yourself or have practices or whatever you want that can make it more likely to happen, but you don't control it. And so it is hard to really deal with. And the place which in his book, he wrote a short book called Why Democracy Needs Religion, that was some lecture stuff that he did for some giant gathering of clergy across Europe. He says the uncontrollability is the site of grace. Uncontrollability is a gift because it can't be manufactured, and you have to be in a receptive place for the encounter. And so he goes, like, our job, if we think of ourselves as stewards of communities or and such, is not to engineer, but to create the conditions to receive it, for encounter, for where the other in their otherness is the site of being addressed. And
yeah, I love this. I mean, there's direct translations of these 4 into Whiteheadian concepts, you know, that affection and prehension. That sense that we're not set apart from the world. Our thinking activity, our consciousness is not some inner theater that merely represents in some symbolic language of thought what's happening in a world that's fundamentally distinct and separate from us. Rather, you know, we're in direct prehensive relationship to the world, which is to say that the nature of causality is itself a flow of feeling from over there to in here, right? And external and internal are bridged by what Whitehead calls prehension. And I think that speaks very much to affection in Rosa's sense there. And then self-efficacy, I mean, we're each moment by moment self-creating. As we feel the feelings of the world that stream into us, we have to decide moment by moment how to feel them. And so we're not just passive receivers, we're participants. This is the subject superject structure of experience in Whitehead's account. We're always receiving, and then we give something back in response. We can't not participate in the flow of feelings. And then, in terms of transformation, the ways that we are changed by the encounter, and then we change the world in turn, and in the ways that we respond to that encounter. That's, the many become one and are increased by one. That's the cumulative nature of time. Nothing ever happens the same twice, right? And then uncontrollability. I mean, obviously, this is process theology's main issue with the theologies of omnipotence and the image of God as a Caesar or a dictator, imposing in a coercive fashion form and law and so on the world. And Whitehead's God is not omnipotent. Whitehead's God is not in control. Not even God is in control of what happens next. And so that sense of unpredictability and open-ended creative evolution may be lured by divine beauty as a kind of gift that we can become worthy of, right? And so, like you're saying, we can position ourselves so as to be more available, making ourselves more available to receive this gift, rather than imagining that we might come to control the natural world or control even ourselves, control human nature. So very easy translation to process thought there.
Yeah. We got a few cool comments off of Substack in the chat. Dan said it reminds him of Henry Wyman's creative interchange, which it definitely does. Wyman, underutilized Chicago school process thinker. Also, E.E. Reed says, it talks about like the actual German word for uncontrollability there was one coined by Boltzmann in the 30s, and when he is giving in his work on Kierkegaard's philosophy. Just in case, people over in the chat, that's going on. Now, one thing here, and this, I don't really think it's going to take long, other than, what he points out when we're not open for resonance is what we get is echo. And so you hear back your own voice, it feels good, but it's just me. And the best example of this that leads to everything is that our social media algorithms are showing us only what we already agree with, or like the monstrous version of the other to even reinforce what we agree with, right? Like, the libs of TikTok or whatever, that kind of thing. And so that means this is not an encounter with the other, it's an encounter with the same. It's an echo that reinforces our encounter with the other without transformation. And resonance, the other gets the dignity of their own otherness. It is something other than you that can challenge, contradict, and transform you. And so that it becomes a risky act of solidarity, or could become a conversation with a neighbor. But for him, this element, he says, is the uncontrollability of the encounter with the genuine other is the part his students get most uncomfortable with, because they don't want to encounter certain others with the possibility of their own transformation.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I could be wrong. He's obviously an inheritor of the Frankfurt School and belongs within it, but he's sitting there going like, I could be wrong. Maybe some of the ones that came before me are more correct about their ability to diagnose the situation and claim from on high kind of like where we're going. But to me, that element, just hearing how it responds, is one of those places, just as a philosophical theologian, when I think of the differences between how I show up and how I articulate it, and then how other more progressive Christian theologians may do the same. It is this issue, like that that you don't get to a place where encounter is nested in safety the whole time.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, the vulnerability of resonance is something that these neoliberal capitalist social conditions systematically undermine, because we've lost trust in one another. We're all competing, and we feel like if I let my guard down such that I might be affected and deeply changed by someone else's view, then I might just be being swallowed up into their story and, becoming just contributing to their success instead of, my success. And so, our capitalist economic whirlpool is really encouraging us to reduce human beings to our vices, right? Greed and selfishness and aggression and so on. And to make us feel like our human virtues are just pie in the sky, idealistic, utopian nonsense. And so we can't trust each other. We think if I'm not selfish and greedy and competitive, then someone else is going to get a leg up on me. And so why would I open myself to resonance when I can insulate myself within an echo chamber and try to influence people to be, in fact, an influencer who's in some sense actively constructing one's own echo chamber by converting others to one's own views rather than being touched, rather than being open to actually encountering an otherness that might threaten one's preconceived view of who they are and how the world is supposed to work. But it's dangerous. I mean, it's risky. It's vulnerability, allowing yourself to, it's opening yourself to being hurt, and it's allowing yourself to be really emotionally, putting yourself emotionally at risk. It's because you could get burnt, but I think it's also what everybody secretly wants. We not only want to be understood, like we want to understand others, and we want to feel like our horizon of interpretability is beyond just the echo chamber, but actually includes allows us to participate with others in a deepening relationship to reality, to the divine, the universe, whatever. So,
yeah. All right. So the next ones are those are kind of like this. In my attempt to like at least communicate without us getting to read yet some of the big ideas, and like I said at the beginning, he's a sociologist that wants to do the big picture thing and process types. That's how you get Matt at the beginning saying like, well, here's 5 complete different disciplines I like to hang out in, because I'm a process person, because it is a mode of philosophy that goes big picture. So Rosa's theory isn't just a compelling social critique. It resonates with a profound metaphysical and theological tradition like process philosophy. And so this is just a few of the things that came to mind. Some of them are more philosophical, some are theological, but could be the lure, you could say, to come hang out with us in Zoom as we read through some Rosa. Some here, and you've already made some of these connections, but it's just that element of relationality. One of Rosa's lines in the Resonance book is, in the beginning is the relation. The self and the world are constituted through their interaction. And, that has that kind of radical relationality that's in process thought, which is to be related. Entities are constituted by their prehensions, feelings of others. The other is internal to the self, right? Like, so like part of what, it was going on even in the way you were looking at the elements of resonance is resonance is a way in which we interpret our own becoming, recognizing that we're already intersubjectively related through both the prehension of the past, including our own, but also the whole web of relations before, and then the possibilities, which are not evaluated just in light of our own well-being, but the community of life that we meet. And then the inner room of sorts for process metaphysics is how the actual entity actualizes and responds to this. But it responds to it always already in relations, and it's in those relations it comes and which it goes, and so that there's a there's a resonance of resonance of sorts, and they both have a critique of alienation. You mentioned it, so did the it showed up in the chat that alienation has a deep resonance with Whitehead's kind of critique of abstraction and a misplaced concreteness, the fallacy of misplaced concreteness, where you take dead substantial things as if they're reality, right? It would be like looking at the whirlpool. Kids are going around. One kid knocks another kid out. He goes under, starts coughing stuff up. It's on the side. And then you go, I'll tell you what the problem is. It's that one kid that ran into that other kid. And if you got mad and then pulled that one kid that ran the other kid over out of the pool and are letting them have it, and then, oh, what a horrible big brother you are. The same time, other people are going to run into each other in the whirlpool because the thing isn't the thing. It's the energy in the relationships. And if we abstract them out of it, we might go, oh, the real problem is whoever our other is, as opposed to the real problem is the kind of alienation that justifies and legitimates our own relational alienation from each other, keeping toxic relational energy in place, blah, 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 blah. And so that they both have that shift of relations over substance that I think will make reading it together fun.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be great fun. And I love, opportunities to read together, because it's for me an opportunity for resonance, right? I mean, we're going to be trying to make sense of this text together and applying it in different ways. And I think I'm so drawn to Rosa's work. I mean, I've studied Charles Taylor for many years, and I've been reading about Rosa for a while, but this will actually be the first time I'm reading Rosa directly. So I have to credit you for finally getting me to dive into that trip. But, I'm a romantic, but I also recognize, like Hegel's critique of romanticism, and like even Charles Taylor himself in his book on Hegel in the 70s, so many decades ago, said romanticism failed. But, here we are last year or 2 years ago, Taylor publishes a book on cosmic connections. He's still dealing with romanticism because romanticism is still the most relevant response to our situation of modern alienation. But I love the way that, Rosa, like Taylor and like Whitehead are trying to draw back the importance of theism for the as one of the conditions, the cultural conditions for successful self-realization, right? As well as naturalism and secularism, and but romanticism, I think, is the attempt to kind of acknowledge this new scientific orientation and this new political orientation towards autonomy and whatnot, while also bringing in that theological component and bringing in enchantment, but without the loss of autonomy, right? We're trying to, I think what romanticism fails because in Taylor's sense, it forces us to just, dissolve our subjectivity into a larger current of life, and we lose autonomy in that sense. And so how can we allow romanticism to come of age, to use a phrase from Owen Barfield, another great romantic? And I think Rosa's work is really a major, offers us a major path forward for the maturation of romanticism. So I'm thrilled to be reading this with you.
So Barfield uses the phrase romanticism come of age.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool. I think of Bonhoeffer and reading Dilthey doing the world come of age, where he's like, religion's not necessary. Well, this isn't the way he puts it, but religion, we should be post-religious in the sense of a cultural nomos that instantiates singularity and communities of orientation. This is my language, not his, but the religionless Christianity bit was coming in prison while Bonhoeffer is reading Dilthey, and about talking about the world come of age. And he's like, it's actually a good thing. Like, now you don't decide. Your faith is not primarily about your relationship to a second order construction, be it the institution or your theology. Your faith is about the orientation of your finitude towards, the ultimate transgressive love revealed in the Christ that shows up, right? If you get that correct for Bonhoeffer, then the face of every other is the invitation of God. That's what faith would mean. It resonates very much with like Levinas and that whole thing. But okay, so here are just a few things that popped up in his talks and Q&A things. He has that one book that he gave, Religion, Why Democracy Needs Religion. But then I was at this event at Princeton that he came to. It was a bunch of different, largely religion scholars or sociologists of religion engaging his work. So it was, funny. Like, there you discover he grew up in like hippie Hindu family in the Black Forest, but then became part of the German Lutheran State Church because he loved organs, and he plays organ at the little church where he lives in the Black Forest. He's like, with that Heidegger energy, like, I don't want to have to live in the city. And when he travels, he loves to find out the coolest church organs in town. So when he shows up and goes, like, churches are one of the traditions that have just avoided, they don't care about the AAA horizon. I'm like, you have not met American evangelicalism yet. But I understand old cathedrals in Europe are a protest to this. But in those two settings, here are some of the things that he mentions that might be good to come up to that are really connected to that kind of a relational account of the divine. His phenomenology of religion, which is much as he is a sociologist, is going to get towards doing theology directly, and process have a similar drive to move beyond that distant, impassible deity type image. One of the elements he gives is even thinking about the difference between prayer and magic. And this is a moment he's channeling Schleiermacher, where he wants to reframe prayer not as magic in the sense of controlling the divine, orienting towards your own ends, but as prayer as an attempt to resonate, to be in a posture of listening. And that'll, it's very similar to, like, if you read Marjorie Suhaki's book on prayer from a process perspective, and such. Rosa and process are both see religion as one of the places that invites us to be someone who hears, and that the world can be heard. And so there's this one of the questions that he thinks we can't help but ask, but are told is stupid, is that sense of being addressed. Like, is there someone there, or is the cold, mute, silent world the truth of things? And resonance, or communities of resonance, regardless of what tradition they're in or whether they're intentionally religious, underneath it is that these are communities whose rituals, stories, actions, and such preserve an orientation that as a species has been rather ubiquitous, that in the modern world is continuously muted. And that's like, to be human is to be addressed in this kind of sense. And then there's, this really sets up ways of thinking about kind of like larger panentheism or pan-experientialist accounts, and problems of divine power being shifted, once you don't have like the distant monarch, because you process and Rosa in different ways have that, what would you call it? They have the aftertaste of romanticism, right? Like, once they get done saying something, there's that stuff that's left in your mouth. It's not just like you had it and it's gone. There's like the romantic residue, like a high tannin red wine. You don't have to have it in your mouth to know you're drinking it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is where I might want to, for the first time, nuance or add another perspective to what Rose is doing here. I mean, I like this distinction between prayer and magic, but I'm also, um, quite influenced by this sort of hermetic and alchemical
Hmm.
uh, line of thinking, where the role of the human being is, in some sense, to participate in God's work of creation, and that there's maybe a difference between, sometimes it's light and dark magic, or I don't necessarily like that way of framing it, because darkness is wonderful and we don't need to put it down. But magic of that seeks control versus magical practice that would seek to cooperate with and to
Hmm.
facilitate this divine work of creation. And so, from the process perspective, God needs our help.
Hmm.
Right, the power of God is the worship God inspires, as Whitehead puts it, and so we have a role as what Tolkien would call sub-creators.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a theurgical role, and that I think it bears some resemblance to magic, in that in the way that Christian hermeticists and alchemists would talk about it, where it's not an attempt to control the world. And you can see, as you know, people like Francis Yates argued, that there's a connection between magic and the birth of technoscience,
Hmm.
through this form of coercive attempt to coercively control nature, to subject it to the human will. But there's another kind of magical practice that is seeking alignment with the divine, and to further the work of creation through participation with God. So that's
Yeah,
not, I don't think I'm disagreeing, but I'm just
no,
nuancing
well,
what we
I'll
mean by
just say,
magic.
like, the genealogy of that distinction in sociology is making the same point you're making. So it goes like Durkheim differentiates religious practices as like collective moral orienting practices to magical practices, which are individual and manipulative. That's like the
Yep.
birthplace of that distinction in sociology. um, Max Weber picks it up and says, here's magical practices and religious prayer, when he's in his book Sociology of Religion. And the shift that both of them are trying to point out is uh, where like one, magic for their term, right? And this is when you would say like pagan and it's derogatory, like that's the world moment that they're speaking from. For them, it would be communities that harness the sacred to control nature, um,
Mhm.
and or to orient one part of divinity towards another part of divinity, or like you're making a sacrifice not out of love, gratitude, or worship, but out of incentivizing a response. And so religion for them is a distinction that's made in kind of like the evolution of religion towards what we think of as like the post-axial religions, where religion's not magical in the sense of getting what we want out of the divine, but religious in the sense of expressing the moral orientation of the divine in our life. Um,
Yep.
so it's yeah, I think you're right. And I find it's one of those things where if you're going, you should know it, especially if you're going to read sociology, but it is not going to ring. It's not going to make the points you want to make in the present if you're drawing a magic religion distinction. I find
Mhm.
the energetic distinction, right, of is the spiritual technology being utilized to orient oneself with the call lure of ultimate reality,
Mhm.
or is it is it a means of working the other way, right? Where like in
Yep.
like reorienting, you're giving the initial aim here kind of thing.
Mm.
um but
Mhm.
yeah, but sociologists, I don't know, I try not to give everyone a hard time if half the time I have to tell them what prehension means before they can know what I meant. It's like, look, I, I, I can't. How can you can make up a new word just like me, so that you and your few friends that know what it means have to define it before you can say anything.
We
And
could just talk about our feelings instead, Trip. We don't need to use these highfalutin abstract philosophical terms, but
Oh, nah, that's uncomfortable. But yeah, so I just say like, this is something like I'm really interested in how the conversation will go when we're having it. But the all that uncontrollable gift of the new bit, Rosa, is picking his up from Bultmann. So it is a New Testament scholar using Kierkegaard to get at it. He also puts it in conversation with Hannah Arendt's natality. And then you have the whole kind of like adventure and zest as the additions for Whitehead going on, that I think will be quite a bit of fun to see the connections as it plays out. And I haven't got to the chapter in the new book at the end where he unpacks this more, so it'll be fun there. But the last thing is, and this to me is kind of the, if I was like occupying the like process Rosa pulpit, then like this would be like the conclusion of the sermon kind of thing, where what is the kind of invitation is to stop and listen. And he has a whole little play on German that takes place on it, but to stop running, that desire to stop the frantic running of dynamic stabilization, the stopping isn't first a movement thing, but an attention thing. It's this activity of listening up. And so for him, the whole play in German is that, half the words up and half of it is to listen. And so you get listen up. And so we have to cease the orientation of aggressive conquest of the world so our ears can open up again to its call. Right. And so oftentimes, we give a sociologist could give a description of something, but it doesn't have a kind of, a prescriptive invitation. But his connection of alienation and aggression and AAA, all that kind of stuff, and resonance is in many ways an invitation to a new orientation of like putting on your listening ears and encountering the world. And so the way I've thought about this, especially for people that are community leaders or faith leaders and such, is what does it mean to become kind of schools of resonance? Like if we don't think we control the solution, but can cultivate the space for it to arrive, then that means we have to resist that desire to just conquer and instead embrace the risk of being transformed. And so how do our conversations around school tables or churches or community things, even conversations with friends, become places where we stop trying to control outcomes and practice the art of listening, the spacious making for genuine encounter of other in the otherness. And one of the observations he makes when he's giving this lecture to all the religious leaders in Europe is he's like, that is the structure of your liturgy. Like you start with one music, not words, and then you come in and go, there's this like giant voice of gratitude, and then you say, what do we have to do to orient ourselves to genuinely listen? We're going to name the ways in which we've refused it in this week through the confession, affirm the reception of grace, and then attend to what? The word. And at the moment confession's been given, you listen. Like you hear it read, you then are trying to encounter. And so like that dynamic, when talking to the clergy, he's like, it is a sacramental orientation. And then, so he's like, what if we learn there is something we need to learn for how we listen to the voice of our neighbor, especially the neighbor in whom we don't see ourselves, and how we listen to the cry of the earth and this kind of thing. So like that, that is the direction when I've seen him in conversation with religious leaders and at Princeton at the event with a whole bunch of theologians and stuff, that those are his intuitions of the payoff and the punch. But I imagine, I mean, I like those, but I'm sure we'll end up, more will come up as we're reading it.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about the logos that I mean, it suggests the word, it suggests divine speech, and yet divine speech is a type of speech that's always already responsive and listening in that sense to what the to what creatures to what the world needs. And so it's a form of speech that arises out of a kind of silent resonance, and we can participate in this. I've as I've developed my capacity to to lecture and to enjoy it as a spontaneous improvisational activity, it's all about being able to listen and speak from that silence. And so we don't need to have any kind of opposition between silence and speech, because otherwise it might seem like the logos is the exact opposite of listening. But I think logos is always already in relationship to, say, if logos is the masculine pole, then there's Sophia as the feminine pole of that, which is this kind of resonance chamber, this kind of background of silence within which the word can vibrate and be transmitted. And so logos always silently says Sophia alongside whatever words are being explicitly articulated. There's always a listening in the background. And I feel the difference, between conversation and dialogue, where there is a mutual responsiveness and a capacity to listen to one another, and then debate or the type of exchange that's competitive, where each party is arriving on the scene with a preconceived idea that they're right, and there's no real opportunity for mutual transformation to occur. So,
yeah, and I mean, I think an important element about even the prologue in John, where you get Logos or Sophia, there is oftentimes people take it as this. There's like two parts of it. One, the opening, there's like the divine initiative in the sense that like every moment of becoming, the call comes forth from the primordial nature, but the Logos or Sophia. But the poem ends by making very clear just as to what this means. Like it comes to its own and it doesn't know it, right? Like, so the divine initiative or the gift of the divine self for participation as possibility shows up, and it's not like the creature knows its creatureliness alongside God. It doesn't know its own. And then what does it do in response? But takes up sandals, right? Like the word is not a word that is a proclaimed singularity. It is a word that comes nonetheless, like despite we've muted the world and are unaware that the very source of our own intimacy of light and love and all these things that are a part of the whole cosmic story shows up. You don't know it, and that you're its own. And the response isn't damnation. It's participation in the deepest way, right? And then it says the word became sarx, right? It doesn't even say the word became a body, it becomes sarx, the very stuffness of a Platonist metaphysics, like that all material reality is sarxing around, and then the logos becomes sarx. What's fascinating to me is I've always read. I remember reading, some of the medieval theologians that removed the dynamism out of the prologue of John. I'm going, I don't know, this doesn't make sense to me. It sets up incarnation, right? The moment the incarnation only works if Mary had a birthing canal that functioned like a, like a pipe and doesn't contribute, then but to me, there, like, you see all those elements of it resonates so deeply with the relational vision of process, but then you see all four little elements of a resident event there. It is so uncontrollable, it could end in a cross. It is so uncontrollable, but you say, like, not my will but thine be done in the midst of it, right? And so the
Yeah.
open commensality of Jesus and the radical hospitality that managed to piss off quite a few people isn't tertiary to what divine address is. It's actually the very contours of it.
Yeah.
The risky vulnerability of others' otherness.
Yeah. That's beautiful, Trip. That revelation might remain incomprehensible, but it may be prehensible. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not comprehend it, but we might prehend it. And maybe Rosa can help us begin, at least philosophically, to approach some sort of comprehension, but we'll see.
Yes.
Can't be predicted in advance, but I'm optimistic.
Uncontrollable. Well, the only thing I can predict is I have fun talking with you. I have a lot of fun reading Rosa, and doing this means I don't have to try to talk about him with a random adult that just happens to have a kid on the same sports team and is uninterested. And they're like, what did you do today? Do you know Hartmut Rosa? What? He's a sociologist. Let me tell you. So I'm very excited as to what will come up, and we'd love any of you that are watching now live, or any of you listening or watching later, to join up. I'll put links on the post so you can go to Footnotes to Plato or Process This or both and join, and you'll get invites to all the Zoom sessions and such, and then we'll read. You want to show the book one more time? This is a book we'll read, but I'll put it on the post as well. It is Time and World, and if you write being and time down, then you'll think, oh, that's close, but it's not. It's not the same book. And I don't know about doing a Zoom reading group of being and time. I could do the introduction, and then chapters 4 and 5. Those are pretty fun. But there's some real painful bits in there.
Yeah. I don't know if we have a start date for this yet, but I guess we'll follow up about that. Yeah, for when the reading group.
We'll have one when anyone that's not on here live listens to it. Because I got to look back at our text messages. I know we were like, oh, we should do this like 2 weeks before we start. And then.
That sounds about right. Great.
That was what we discussed. But what the exact day and time, I don't know. But no one except the live people will know we don't know this, because it will be on there when they watch.
Excellent.
The final version.
Excellent.
Through the power of editing.
Time. We can easily control time.
Yes. Cool.
Trip, it's always a pleasure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This was enriching, and can't wait to continue.
It's going to be fun, and I hope you have a wonderful day on the other side of the country. And I have 3 people in my house with the flu and don't have it yet. So,
I'm
yeah.
not going to make any predictions, but
you don't need to. It's uncontrollable.
Good health, Trip.
It's uncontrollable, and I just keep distributing hydration and medicine at a distance.